Hey, it is time for Illustration Masterclass here on Adobe Live, and I'm glad that you're with me today on this beautiful Friday, wherever you're watching from all over the world. Thank you for joining me. And those of you who know me know that I love Photoshop brushes. It's one of the things that has given me such great joy over the years, creating custom brushes for you all out there in the world. Over 2,000 brushes now. This is just something that I can't explain it. I don't know why I like making brushes so much, but it's just something that when I sit down and I say I'm going to make some brushes, I get excited. It's fun. Never ceases to be just a source of enjoyment for me. So isn't that weird? But today we're talking about watercolor brushes. We're talking about emulating watercolor in Photoshop. And I'm doing this because it's been a request that I've gotten, which is to do more content about watercolor emulation in Photoshop, since now we have at Adobe Fresco, which has the live watercolor brushes that essentially stay wet when you're working with them. And Photoshop does not have anything like that. And so people are like, well, what can I do in Photoshop? And I say, don't worry. For years, okay, there have been these watercolor brushes that you can access. And while they do not stay wet, there is a technique you can use with them that if you get used to it, there's all kinds of great stuff you can do. And I'm going to show you today what the technique is and what the brushes are that I use to make things look like watercolor. And I think you're going to like it. So if you're watching over on YouTube or over on Twitter or elsewhere, just remember that I'm following the live chat on Behance. That's be.net/live. Okay. Jeff LeBlanc. Hello, Jeff. Nice to see you. Says the audio is out of sync. Let's see. Is there something going on? Not sure. My microphone seems to be working. There you go. Microphone's working. Don't know why the audio is out of sync. I guess I could start the stream over again and see if that makes a difference. I don't know. If it's like out of sync by a lot, let me know in the chat if it's out of sync by like a half a second. Alrighty, so we're going to jump over into Photoshop, and we're going to hope that it's going to be, oh, Cody says it's pretty out of sync. What would cause that? I really don't know, because I don't think that's happened to me before, so I have no idea. Alright, Cryo says it's better. Thaddeus says it's better now. Okay. I don't know. Let me know. Let me know. Okay, so moving on to Photoshop. Let's see. Oh, Cryo says it's okay now. Okay. Whatever. Here we go. You see I'm starting to draw already some lines with a pencil. And the reason I'm doing this is because today I'm mainly going to focus on using watercolor with some pencil lines like for picture book work, just because it's a look that I really like. And you may have seen in the preview for this show today that the illustration I created had that look of pencil lines with watercolor being painted inside of those lines. Hey Peter, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, so we want to make sure that we're going to at least touch on that, since that wasn't the preview image. Don't want to do any false advertising, but just so you know, the pencil that I'm currently using is in the Mega Pack, and it's in the drawing box, okay? And it's called Perfect Pencil 2, right here, this little guy. All right. And for those of you who are looking for these custom brushes, the watercolor brushes, obviously, for this class today, head on over in your brush settings to this little drop-down menu in the top right corner. Okay, it's 4 lines stacked on top of one another, and come to where it says Get More Brushes, and you're going to find then a page where you can use your Adobe credentials to log in and then download a whole mess of brushes. You'll be all set to go. One of those is the watercolor brushes. You download those, it'll say Kyle Real Watercolor right there, or it might just say watercolor, depends on what they've named the file most recently. I know there was a little renaming that rushed through at some point, so either way, the word watercolor will be there. And inside there, you're going to find about 150 brushes. No lie, that's a lot. All of which are designed to help you with watercolor work here in Photoshop and in Fresco if you want to use those in combination with the live brushes. Very nice to do that. All right, so we're going to start by looking at some of these and understanding how they behave. All right, so quickly, let's do it. I'm going to grab a nice, beautiful blue color here, and we're going to paint with that. And if you open up the watercolor brush set, you'll see right away, Kyle's Real Watercolor, 240, 270, 345, there are these numbers. These are what I consider to be some of the most basic brushes, okay, in the set. All of these can be resized up a certain amount. You know, this is only 40 pixels, but you can definitely size that up. Like I've got it at 100 pixels right now, and I'm painting with it. And I want to tell you that the key to working with these brushes and getting a result that you like is to be using a pretty consistent amount of pressure, all right, throughout when you're painting an area. And the first thing I want to explain about these is that you're not going to be able to paint an area next to an area that you've already painted where you've lifted up the stylus without having some kind of a visible seam right there. See that? Okay. Now, if you know this going into it, then what you have to remember is if you're going to paint an area, okay, so let's say, for example, I have a shape, something like this, all right? This is a shape that I want to paint, something like that. Then I have to know that when I go to paint that, I want to kind of fill it all in with one pass, okay, more or less. I want to just kind of get all that area filled in with one pass, all right? And that's going to give me a nice bit of consistent color all the way throughout, okay? Now, if I just want to freehand that, same kind of thing. I just want to do this, paint this area, okay? There we go. Now, you're going to get some little variations here and there, but that's kind of what you want with watercolor. There's a built-in paper texture and all this other nice stuff with these, and I'm good to go. But if I come in again and paint on top of it, right, notice that you're eventually going to get some seams. But you'll notice too that what I'm doing right now is a little different than what I did in the first demo. And the reason you're seeing less of a sort of a seam effect is because I'm controlling the amount of pressure I use. I'm using very, very light pressure. Now this is one of the ways to get a really good result with these brushes and get that sort of watercolor magic. And that is, if I just paint a circle here for you, you'll see. Using very light pressure, look at how faint, okay, that is. So I know what the color is I've selected right there, but the opacity now, okay, has been reduced because I'm simply using less pressure to paint. Now, what I can do is I can use a bit more pressure and paint over that area and just sort of reduce the pressure as I get close to the edges, right, of that little area I just painted on top. And so what you're going to see there is this really subtle gradation, okay? Maybe in this section here, I want to kind of darken that up a bit. And then again, use light pressure out to the edge. This is really a feel kind of a thing, okay? You got to do this and kind of learn to just feel what it is to sort of soften an edge out. And you're doing all of this in one pass. You're not lifting. So you put some down, and when you do lift and you reapply, you want to use very light pressure and just kind of massage your way through it to get that result. Okay, now these brushes in this first little section here will all kind of work in that same way. Some will have these nice dark edges that give you that feeling of the pigment being pushed out to the edge of the shape and darkening up there as it dries. Okay, and so for this one, same thing. If I want to come over the top of this, I can do more of that. But then if I soften as I continue to paint like this, sort of soften that effect so it's not so severe. Okay, so all of you, download these brushes and start to play around to see what it feels like to do what I'm doing here on screen. You'll notice that it only takes a little bit of time to get used to that feeling of adjusting the pressure as you go, okay? And I encourage you to do this in a way where you do have some varying pressure throughout that first pass as you paint a shape so that you get little irregularities on the interior of the shape when you paint that really has that feeling of watercolor. Okay, Cody says the watercolor brushes are sorcery. Well, thank you, Cody. I take that to be a nice compliment right there. Haha, Robzilla. It's got to say Kyle or it's not in style. I'm going to put that on my t-shirt and wear it every day. Yes. Alrighty, so Melissa, hi, nice to see you. RB, thanks for joining everybody. Afroha's here. Hello, Afroha. Hey, Justice, thanks for being here. And who else is here? I know I mentioned some other names. Manuel, hello. Can't see the screen. Gosh, I hope you can. Let me know if you still can't see it. I don't know what's going on there. All right, so moving on through these. Now, this is a very different brush, so I want to point this out. There are a couple of brushes that behave in a different way, and this is the Watercolor 3, and there are a few like this. Now, painting with this, okay, you're not going to get that same sort of effect I just mentioned, okay? You'll notice as soon as you paint with it, it just doesn't have the same feeling. All right, and you can go really soft on the edges with this, and look, as I continue to reduce pressure and paint outwards, I can get the equivalent of what is called, you know, a soft edge. All right, when you're painting with watercolor, you can have a hard edge like this, same brush, okay? I'll come out here, I'm gonna make this square, right? Then on the left side, watch, I haven't lifted it up yet. I'm just gonna continue to paint with less and less and less and less pressure until I get that on the left side. Okay, so you get that hard edge shape with that soft edge on the left, right? So this is another way to paint. Again, make this brush bigger if you want. This is now 200 pixels. It's gonna work just fine. Knowing what it's gonna do though, gives me the ability to decide I'm gonna have a soft bit of a shape right there, and as I come out to this edge, just apply more pressure and sort of block that in, okay? And get an effect like that. Very nice. All right, so that is the Watercolor 3, and there are a few other brushes that will work in this same way in the set. Now, if you were just to use a few of these, okay, these first, you know, 6, 7, 8 brushes, you could probably do a convincing and really passable watercolor painting. Because if I use this brush, okay, and then jump back to something like this first one we used, this 240, okay, look, I can take this brush and over the top of this, paint with it, okay, just to add some more irregularity and some nice texture and things like that. It's very subtle, okay, but the combination of the two is what's going to give me a really nice result, right? If I want to go darker up in this corner, I can sort of come up against that edge there and then soften as I go outwards, right? And get a little bit more of that. You can grab another color if you want to go a little warmer like this and hit it with that other color and just go soft from there. Stuff like this. And this is just using these first few brushes, but there are a lot more that we can experiment with and play with, okay? Like I said, about 150 of these. So moving on, these others are going to have a similar behavior, but slightly different edges. Some will have a more ratty kind of edge. If you look at this one, see how nice and sort of broken that edge is there with that one. This one as well. These are all similar but different, if you know what I mean. This one's called Irregular Edge, and you'll see why. See how that edge kind of breaks apart here and there, right? So that's really nice to layer over top of something like this. Just kind of soften that up, adding a bit more texture as I go. Always using really light pressure to start with and just kind of moderating, right, as I go, all right? Really nice. Paint over here like this. Look, just popping a bit of color on top. See what that does. It's subtle, but it adds to that feeling of that kind of medium of watercolor, right? All right, so now we're going to start to get into some others here that are going to have some different effects. Some of them will be similar, some different. And a lot of people, what they do is they find just maybe a handful, 5 or 6 brushes from this set that they really love, that they get used to, and that they want to continue painting with. But just so you know, I want to touch on a few big ones. Speaking of big, this one's called 500 Giant. So this is a very big brush, and I want you to see what this does, okay? It'll lay down an area, okay? And if you use hard pressure, like heavy pressure, you can get some hard edges and a combination of like weird little irregular shapes on the outside there. All right, so now why would you use something like this? Well, I'll tell you, this is the kind of thing that's great for if you have a big area, right? And you want to just throw down some color. So let's say, for example, I have a blue, and I've taken some kind of a basic brush, like this 2017 basic, and let's say that I just put some color down, okay? Like this. This is great for, like, you know, you want to throw down a sky really fast. So you just grab this brush. It's going to do all this lovely stuff, okay? Now, let's just say this is some sky I put down. If I grab this, this really big one, this 500 Giant, okay, and use that same color, whoops, I need to go a little darker. Sorry, there we go. Go a little darker and just hit it like this. What you're going to get, and this may not be easy to see on the screen, but you're going to get a slightly darker patch running through that. And anybody out there who uses watercolor knows how the paint will sometimes dry with a little darker area, a little lighter area, etc. And this is the kind of thing you can do. It's subtle, but it's really effective in communicating that look of, you know, the actual medium, right? This is really great. And there's another one here. This, where is it? Here we go, Big Wash. There we go. You can do similar things, right? See this? And what this is going to give you is a bit of that sort of mottled texture, okay? When the paint dries with a bit more of a sort of a dotty kind of a grain, all right? And so combining all of these together can give you some great results. Now what I like to do also is get really specific. So if I have, for example, let's do this. I'll paint something specific so you can see how this could be really useful, okay? So let's do this. We give ourselves a shape, okay? Like this, like a fish. And notice that the habit I have, and what I always recommend, is you sort of give yourself a kind of an outline. See how I kind of draw it first? This is all one pass. And then I sort of mess around with the interior, and I can sort of smooth things out as I go. So let's say I have a sort of a fish shape like this. Now what I like is to then go with all these other kinds of brushes, like this Big Wash, the one we just showed. I can size that down a bit, okay? And then just hit some bits like this. See that? On the interior. Just kind of hit it a little bit like that. And look what that does. Look at that. So now you get that really lovely effect of the watercolor drying within a regular sort of pattern. And this is what's so beautiful about watercolors when you look at them. It's so fun to see all that rich, beautiful variation inside even a flat wash, right? And different colors will do different things. Some of the colors are grainier when they dry than others. But the beauty of working digitally is you can apply that kind of effect with any color, right? All right, so let's see here. Waterbenders, says RB. Oh, I love me some Avatar. Thanks, Melissa. I'm glad you like them. They feel organic. That's a great thing. Umacorn, you don't have to be good with watercolor to use them in Photoshop. You can just play and experiment, and you can use selection tools and have a lot more control. You have undo, you have erasing. There's so much you can do. How can you save brushes in your library, says Peter. Peter, this depends on your machine. If you have a Mac, that's if you have an Apple, that's an M1 machine. There's currently a bug with libraries that the team is working on that does not allow you to drag brushes from the brush panel into your libraries. So normally that's the workaround. The workflow. Pardon me. Is you have your libraries open. You literally just take a brush, drag it into a specific library, and there it is. But there's currently a bug with M1 Apple computers, Macs. So yeah, I don't know what that's all about. Hopefully that's going to be resolved very soon because I have an M1, which means I can't do it myself. A moment ago I mentioned erasers. I do want to point out there's an eraser right here in this brush set, okay? And this eraser will allow you to get a certain kind of edge when you erase with it that feels pretty good for watercolor. You see what I just did there? So like if I were to wipe away this area for the eye, okay, it's pretty nice to get that sort of look. And I like this eraser for working with watercolor specifically. It makes it feel usually like you've got an area there that that has the right kind of look. And you can even do stuff like this. You can sort of cheat it. You can give yourself a little selection and invert that selection, paint up against the edge of it, you know, like that. And that gives you a nice little kind of a erased area as well. So take advantage of all the tools you have, selections, everything else, you know, there's really no limit. Just use what you want. Little eye right there. See? And I'm really in the habit of sort of hitting things twice. It's just something that I've gotten used to doing. You know, like I can size my brush down And if I draw sort of a gill like this and another one, I'm sort of in the habit of going over that area a little bit, you know, and just part of it, just to kind of, see that? Just to add that little bit that makes it look like, you know, a little drop of water or something got right there, and carried a bit more paint with it. You kind of get in this habit of adding little details like that. You do it whatever feels kind of right for you, right, for your style. All right, so moving on. Now there are so many brushes in here, and what I want to do is just point out a few that have a special quality to them. So we're going to bypass a lot of these. Many of them will be self-explanatory. You know, for example, alcohol. You know, if you've ever used alcohol with watercolor, you know what that does. It can remove some of the paint and push paint out to the areas of wherever the drops of alcohol hit. And so if you were to paint with this 2017 Basic, for example, put some color down like this, and then grab the alcohol, what it does is it automatically converts your brush to an overlay mode, okay? And it gives you this nice effect right here, okay? See that? And if you do something like use white, you can do this, get like a salt kind of effect. Alcohol will do a similar thing, but it's nice to be able to do this and get a really lovely texture right there. Go ahead and swap those back. I'm hitting the X key to swap foreground and background color. You can hit some of the edges there and get dark and light all together. So try that. But what I want to point out here is, let's go, here we go, Color Magic. I want to talk about these for a moment. So one of the things I mentioned up top was that in fresco you have watercolors that stay wet, okay? And there are times when you want to do some kind of a gradation and things like that. Well, there are multiple ways to do this in Photoshop, but one special way is to take advantage of these Color Magic brushes, okay? So let's take a look at this Color Magic 2K17 variant right here, okay? Now, the way this brush works is it will take advantage of the foreground and the background color thanks to color dynamics. And the way it does this is through pen pressure, meaning that if I use heavy pressure, okay, I'm painting with the foreground color, all right? But if in the same stroke, if I start to lighten up the pressure, it's gonna bring in some more of that white. And look what's happening up here. This whole area is gonna be lighter than what's down at the bottom. And it's because more of that white paint is being introduced, okay? So you can see the difference right there. Now what that means is I could take my background color and set it to something like a rich, deep, dark blue. And now if I use sort of medium pressure, right, in between heavy and light pressure, look at that. I get a nice kind of a violet color, okay? And why is that? Well, it's mixing together that red and that blue. But what's cool is that that mixture is going to be subtle, okay? And it's also going to vary here and there. I can't maintain exactly the same amount of pressure all the way through, right? So what I get are these nice kind of streaks of one color or the other that are really subtle, blending in and out of that same area. Now what you can do to take advantage of this if you want to do some kind of a gradation is you can start with heavy pressure, right? And then lighten up as you go down and get what's called a graded, right, or variegated wash, like this. And those of you who use watercolor know what this is, right? Graded wash would be if I just, again, left it to white in the background color and wanted to have a nice rich color that kind of faded into nothing, like so, okay? That's the white coming through. So that's what that is. You can do this with these Color Magic brushes. They each will allow you to take advantage of the foreground and the background color thanks to color dynamics in your brush settings panel. And if you've never played with those, open up your brush settings, check out color dynamics, and here you'll notice that we have this option for the foreground and background jitter, meaning you're switching between the two, but in this case, we're just talking about controlling foreground and background. The word jitter normally refers to something that's kind of irregular or difficult to predict. and that would be a random sort of quality to it. If we were to up the foreground jitter, okay, it's going to actually be pulling from the pink and the white at the same time while I'm painting. Right, now that'll be much more clear if I switch this to something like that blue again. All right, and you can see how the color variation is a lot more intense there. All right, if I just make one single stroke, you can see it bouncing back and forth between each of those colors. All right, now there are times you might want to do that, but I just want to make sure that you know that jitter is not the same thing as simply controlling the foreground and background, switching out between one and the other. Here we have a control set to pen pressure, as we mentioned, and there's already a built-in very subtle jitter for the color, the saturation, and the brightness. Now, I would probably take that saturation down to 0 if you want really nice bright color, okay? And maybe bump the hue jitter up a bit like this. Depends on what you want. There we go. And now we're back to having that blue come through all the way through to the pink with heavy pressure and everything in between. Okay, so to be able to paint like this in Photoshop is a really special gift that a lot of people don't know is possible. They're not aware that you can use this this technique, and it's especially useful for watercolor. Thanks, I'm glad you like the grain of the watercolor paper, Peter. That's something that makes it really look the right way. Let's see. No questions. Color magic, says Rob. Yeah. Likey. Wow. Okay, great. Oh, glad that you all are digging this. Okay, so moving on. That's color magic. Now don't forget, you could do this with other brushes in the set if you wanted to. So if we jump back for just a moment to something like that basic brush, the 2017 basic we were using this a moment ago to paint with, right? You could, of course, go to your brush settings, turn on the color dynamics. As you can see, they're already there. But here we have a pen pressure control now, and that's going to allow me to do that. Okay. Now, the only issue here is that this brush also has, as you can see, a size associated with the pen pressure. So it's going to reduce the diameter of the brush with pen pressure. So while it is indeed pulling from that blue color in the background, it is also affecting the size. Now, if you don't like that, you want to use the qualities of this brush, but you don't want to have that size jitter or control, go ahead with the size here. It says pen pressure, and you can increase, okay, the minimum size to something bigger if you like. So it's a lot less noticeable, right? So even with a small, with less pressure, I'm not going to have a tiny, tiny mark being made. Okay, so that makes a difference right there. And if I just make one solid stroke, you'll see how it transitions from one color to the next. All right, so that's subtle, and you can even turn this off altogether, and you can turn off roundness jitter and turn off any control for that. And then you can look at your brush stamp preview to ensure that you're going to get a result that has absolutely no change in size. But you may be wondering what causes this cool effect of having the paint pushed out to the edges and very little pigment on the inside. Well, that has to do with your dual brush effects, okay, transfer effects, and texture effects. Not to get into a big brush lesson here, but you can also work on this, okay? The best thing to do to adjust this is to take your opacity and increase the minimum for pen pressure, okay? So put that to like 60%. And for flow, go ahead and increase it to say like 30%. And that will make it so that you have less of that effect, as you can see here, which gives you a greater range of colors that you can access, okay, with that pen pressure control. So finding sort of the sweet spot for what it is you're trying to achieve, right, with these effects can all be done and managed through your brush settings, all right? And I'd like for you to know a few of those things and where to go to adjust them. So moving back to the brushes, we talked about now how to use foreground background color with color dynamics and pen pressure. I want to jump over to, let's see here. Oh, I do want to mention this puddle brush here. For those of you who are looking for more sort of effects that are a bit random, try this one out. It's really fun to just see what happens when you put color down and look at what happens to the edges, right? Some of them will have this sort of a stain look to it and things like that. Lots of good random fun stuff in there. But all right, what I'm really looking for right now are the Wamazing brushes. So let's see if we can find those. Here we come on down, Wamazing. The Wamazing brushes, W-A-M-A-Z-I-N-G, Wamazing. Think of amazing with a W in front of it. What is the deal with these? All right, now I'm going to show you how these work, and they're really special. They do take some getting used to, but once you kind of get a knack for it, you can do some pretty nifty stuff. So let's check it out. We're going to start with the Wamazing basic brush, okay? And I'm just going to increase the size so you can see this clearly. All right, now, painting with this brush, right, with consistent pressure and letting go gives you a result like this. All right, so you get a nice grain in there, all kinds of fun things. Here's where the Wamazing brushes get interesting. Now I'm going to do what I just did, but I'm going to leave my stylus making contact. I'm going to retain or maintain contact with the surface of the tablet, and I'm just going to sort of scrub in a little circle, okay, in one area. So watch, I do the same thing as last time. Come back here, now watch, I'm just scrubbing. Now, even though I just painted here, look what's happening. You can paint and erase in one stroke. And the way I'm doing this is using very, very, very light pressure. Now, if I increase that pressure, okay, I can bring some of that paint back with a chunkier grain. So all of this now that you see here was painted with one continuous brush stroke with varying amounts of pressure. So the reason I use this brush is, let me show you. One of the things, if you use watercolor, you know that happens is you can paint an area, and one little area on the edge like this will just kind of get softer or less sort of opaque, okay? And that's an effect you'll just see happen sometimes. So to be able to use this brush with light pressure like this, and then bear down occasionally, and then lighten up occasionally, all in one single pass, is going to give me a really cool result, okay? Full of texture and variation in value, okay? All from that one pass. All right, so again, what I like about this is that I'm the one controlling it on the fly. So I might paint a shape and then say, okay, here's my shape. Okay, maybe like painting like a shark or something. I just paint through all that size there, and then I come over here and I say, okay, over here is where I'm gonna put like a lighter area, and then over here too it's just gonna get kind of faint. Now I take the same brush and paint over the same area, but look here, I lighten up part of it as I go, lighten it up, so I can add darker areas if I want, but I can also soften those edges. So what this does, in my opinion, it kind of gives you this ability to do that thing we talked about earlier, where you normally with other brushes you can't really add paint to an area without having a visible sort of a seam or an edge. With the Wamazing brushes, you can kind of get away with it, at least if it's on the interior of a shape you've already painted. It's kind of nice to be able to do that. And what we haven't covered yet is the ability to blend two areas, but I'll show you that in a moment. I just want to go further with these Wamazing because there are a lot of them, and what's great is you're going to get different paper textures and different effects with all of them, but they all still retain, if it says Wamazing, it will give you that ability to do what I just mentioned, okay? So like this wax resist one, if you know what wax resist looks like with crayons and watercolors, look at that. See that? You get that same effect you get with wax resist all in one pass, okay? Where you color down with a crayon and then you put watercolor over it, and whatever you've got underneath is going to show through. So what I like is if I had, let's pretend, say I use a yellow crayon. We'll jump out of the watercolors for just a moment, okay, and go into the Mega Pack drawing box, and we'll go to the Kid Crayon brush, okay, K-I-D, crayon, here we go. Here's Kid Crayon, there's also Kid Crayon 2, all right, and let's just say that I have a little area here that I draw. Now if I go back to that watercolor brush, okay, right here, this the wax resist? Let's see. I think I got the wrong one. Which one is it? There's our wax resist. And grab a different color. I can paint over this, and then over the yellow area, just kind of rub over it and get that. And I can paint in between, like that, get like these dark areas, and do that kind of thing. And then you get this really cool result, like you would with crayon and with watercolor, right? So you can really, there's so much you can do with these brushes to emulate the look of natural media, and it's really convincing, but also really fun and flexible, because again, you're using, there's a medium that allows you to have undo, right? And layers and clipping masks and all these amazing things. You combine all that, wow, you're in amazing shape. Now don't forget, any brush, of course, you can hold down the tilde key, and that will allow you to erase with it as well. So look at this. Taking that same brush and erasing out an area that you've already painted with another brush, right, means I can do even more sort of cool textural goodness, and I can erase away an area. We talked about the eraser before, that's included, but you know, if you want to get really specific with an edge quality to something, use a brush to erase, you know? Now, if you don't have access to that tilde key, or it doesn't have the same effect on your keyboard because you're not using a North American keyboard, just take your brush and come over here to where the modes are for it and set it to clear, and you'll get the same result. Clear right here. That's a brush mode that allows you to remove paint with a brush. Note that this does not work with mixer brushes. Very important to point that out, okay? So mixer brushes, very important and special category in Photoshop for brushes, but that erasing technique does not work. Just want to make sure you know that. I just said a moment ago, we want to cover a very important thing, which is blending colors. So we're going to look at blending colors and then do a short illustration with that pencil and watercolor technique, where I'll do quite a few things there. So let's just quickly look at that. So coming back into our watercolor brush set here, we're going to grab any old brush. Let's see, where are the natural edge ones? I love those. Here we go. Natural Edge Painter. All right, let's enjoy a bit of painting with the Natural Edge Painter here. All right, so let's say we paint an area like this. We say, yeah, that's great. And then I say, oh, I wish I had added a bit of shape, a bit of the shape over here. So I come over here and I add to that shape. And as before, I mentioned that there is a seam. So what do you do? Well, come on down here towards the bottom of your watercolor set, and you're gonna find a bunch of blenders. Take the Soft Edge 2, okay, Soft Edger 2, pardon me, and just touch over some of these areas like this. Blend them together, like so. And if you want to add a bit more paper texture there, if you feel like you've lost out on some of that nice rich texture, right? You just pop on up over here, and you have a brush in this brush set called Add Paper Texture. Use the same color or one slightly lighter. Okay, you can sample color, for example, right here using the eyedropper tool. I'm holding down the Option key just to sample this color. And I just paint over that area. And look at that. It adds a lovely paper texture, and you'll never know that that area was blended in the first place. That's it, folks. That's the technique. Easy as pie. So don't stress if you have an area and you want to like paint out a little bit more to it. You don't want that visible seam. That's the technique. Go ahead, blend it a little bit, grab the Add Paper Texture, sample a color that's in the interior there, it's a little lighter, and paint a little texture in there, and you're golden. Move on, okay? There you go. Cody says, oh, I didn't know that. I don't know if you're talking about knowing this or something I did earlier, but either way, I'm glad I helped you out. Any other questions? Thaddeus, you got him. Okay, good. You're good to go. You got the watercolors. Good, good, good. Glad, glad, glad. Sweet. Yes, it is really handy. Yeah, Jane, listen, here's what I do in Fresco. I use the watercolor brushes for big areas. I'll blend, I'll do whatever. And then I draw on top of them with the Photoshop watercolor brushes in Fresco, because they work. So I combine the techniques and you get great results that way. Really, really, really. All right, well, let's do a little drawing here. I want to make sure I didn't leave anything out, but I've covered the basics of what's in this set. Now, of course, there's more. Look, they got more salt and other things you can play with. You know, we talked about, putting some salt down. You know, put some color down. There's different salt in here. You got salt fine, so that's really, really subtle. If I were to use a much darker color, hopefully you'd notice the difference between what just happened there. So if I, oops, let's grab this guy. Here we go. Put some color down, it's a little darker. And then grab this salt fine. You'll see what I mean. See how really, really subtle that is? Subtle, okay? Then you've got the salt coarse, so of course that's bigger and more noticeable. And you've got the salt alt, okay? And that's gonna give you very, very believable salty kind of look. You put salt on watercolors, okay? So there are special effects in there, and you can enjoy those. What we didn't talk about was stains. I just want to quickly mention that they're here. Stains, right here, stain, damp paper, stain, stain, stain. These are great for, and I'll do this in my demo, okay? Putting some color down. Okay, we got a little color right here, using that simple square brush. Okay, and then I say, yeah, this needs a bit more watercolor juice. Let's do it. Stamp. There we go. Stain, damp paper 3. There we go. All you do is you take that brush and you add some watercolor staining to it, if you will. And look how simple that is. And look how gorgeous it is. Look at that. Isn't that fun? So fast, so easy. You could use that brush to your heart's content all over a finished illustration just to add some of that goodness. And that's it. You're done. All right, so let's grab that pencil, perfect pencil from the Megapack drawing box, okay? Megapack drawing box. Scroll on down. Perfect pencil 2. There's my friend. Gonna use a nice, not quite black line to draw with. See that? All right. And we'll do this. We'll do a little hat here. With a little band. And it's going to be a little bear. A bear wearing a hat. And we'll give that bear a nice scarf. This bear wearing a scarf is going to be a very happy winter bear. Okay. And we're going to have him sitting and sipping a little tea here. Sitting on a little rock. And having some tea. Okay, I'll just erase away some of this here. And we'll do a little bump right there for another little bit of the rock there, just to make that a bit more interesting. And we can put some stripes on the scarf. Okay, so there's our little bear. And now really quickly, we're gonna do a bit of color here, okay? So let's have some fun. Let's do a layer underneath him, okay? And here's what I like to do. I like to take my line art and set it to like 90% opacity and then set it to multiply. So it'll kind of come through the color that I paint with the watercolor. All right, so we come over here and do like a nice sort of orangey color, brown orangey color here. And let's go back to our watercolor set, okay? And let's just see, how would you handle something like this? So a moment ago, I was using that natural edge brush, right? There's so many here. And you can really take your pick. Maybe you want to use the rough edge, that's fine too. Look, so many good choices. So you just find what you like. I love that natural edge, so I'm gonna come back to that. This is the natural edge texture, we'll just go with this natural edge texture, for example. I size it down because I like to just kind of have a lot of control, right, as I paint up against the edges. And you'll notice this first pass, right, I'm not using a lot of pressure. I'm just sort of getting that shape in there as accurately as I can. Okay, like so. I come up here. And notice what I said earlier. Try and get it in one pass if you can. And don't worry about the eye there. Don't worry about the nose. Because again, I can just take my eraser and just erase that away, because we're in Photoshop and you can erase watercolors. Now, here's some choices. I can actually take a different color, like a brighter red or something like that. Okay, so I have a slightly different brown color now. And using this same brush, I can just kind of hit it here and there. See that? And that just adds a little bit of interest and some nice variation. And already you're getting that lovely kind of watercolor look, right? But remember that stain brush we mentioned earlier? Look, let's go back to that and check it out. We come down here, we go to that, let's see, stain, S-T-A-I-N, damp paper. There it is, number 3. And I can sample from the same color I used. If I go to my swatches, it shows me these recently used colors. So I can grab that brown right there. And using that stain brush, I can just do that, right? If it goes too far out, no worries. I can always just reduce it in size, okay? And we'll go back to that color there. We'll make it a little less intense. There we go. And this is just for me to add a bit of that sort of lovely watercolor goodness there, okay? And then I can go to this, let's try it with stain damp paper 1. Any of these will work. Or, you know what else? What did we use at the beginning of the show? We were using those original just basic brushes right here at the top. We had that big wash, big wet wash bleed, right? All of these are going to do good things. But the one that we used originally, let's see, was just one of these very simple early ones. Here it is, irregular edge. This is the one. So using this brush, I can just hit a couple of areas here and darken this up if I want, as I paint over it like this. And you'll see how by layering these brushes, okay, just by layering them, I get all this nice, believable, beautiful watercolor texture and beauty. Right, now if I were to show that to somebody and say, hey, what do you think about that? They're not going to say, well, gosh, it looks like Photoshop to me. No, of course not. That looks like watercolor. Fantastic. So just switch it up now. Come over here and use a nice sort of a greenish color. Size this down, and I can hit that scarf there. And like I said before, if I want to leave it, that's fine, but I can also, look at this, I can just pop over this area. Because of the transparency, it's going to darken that up, right? Give me some darker stripes. And I can do that. We can use a nice kind of a grayish blue color for that hat right there. Now, what you'll see happening is the lines of the pencil will be a little darker here and there wherever they make contact with the paint because of that multiply effect we have on that layer. And that is the beauty of that, to be able to have those pencil lines also feel like they're really sitting on the paper there with what you're putting down, right? That really makes a big difference. Very nice to be able to do that. And here I can darken up that nose a little bit. Okay. You really got to try this, folks. It's so fun to do this watercolor work with these brushes in Photoshop, and the results you get are, I think, very pleasing and in a surprising way. So now here what I'll do is I'll put some yellow down and just leave this area here open, and then hit it on the other side there to suggest kind of like a reflection, you know? Just like that. Borrowing from that gray color we used a moment ago, I can go ahead and use very light pressure on the rock all the way through, like this. Okay. And with that same color, not changing anything, I'm just gonna switch it up, make it a little cooler, and then hit it again for this little shadow area here. See that? Kablamo. That's nice. Now, speaking of shadows, you know, if you want to select a color that's got some nice saturation to it, and if you set it to multiply for your brush mode, you know, you can do things like this. You can come in and add like a little subtle shadow under the arm there. Okay, a little shadow along the edge of that scarf, a little shadow here, right? You can get fancy if you want to do things like this. If you want to add shadows and do things like that, you know, up to you. Experiment, you know, do what feels good. All right, now going for a nice kind of a cool pink color here. What I can do is, let's go for a bigger brush. It's got an interesting kind of texture to it and a look to it. One brush we didn't play with, here we go, soft irregular wash variant. Look at that, isn't that nice? We can take that, what we can do is we can create a layer behind here, and we can just kind of hit it like this. And I'll go ahead in a moment and just erase away what I don't need. But in the meantime, what's nice is I'm getting all that cool pattern right there. Let me try that one more time. So what I want to do is I want to have it be not so far off to the right and miss out on some of that area to the left there. So we're just gonna do that here, go a little softer over here. Okay. And if you want to use your lasso tool, you can do that. You can erase if you want. You can do whatever you want. You can paint to get rid of stuff, but I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to lasso tool and leave some bits. See how that goes. We'll see how that looks. And if it doesn't look good, I'll just paint it away. I don't know. See how that looks. Yeah, could be worse. I'm not hating that. It's fine. There we go. Just erase it away bit by bit. And I'm not being like super precious with it, super precise, okay? And there is our little bear. Now, last little step, just grab that add paper texture brush, okay? Here it is. And choose a nice sort of neutrally kind of brown kind of color like that. And on a separate layer, just paint over it like this. See this? Just paint over it a little bit, like that. And then just set that mode to overlay. And now everything is unified. That's a really cool trick you can try, right? And you're good to go. That's it. That's how you do it, gang. So fun. I hope you learned something. It's so fun to paint with these brushes, and I know you're gonna love it. Give it a try, download them, and go make a picture book and go make $1 million. What else is there to say? Have a great weekend. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Each other? Sounds like I need another cup of coffee. Take care of each other. Remember to be kind, and I'll say ciao for now.